Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, the one and only Seth, and Mr. Mike, or Data Mike.
Data Mike. Data Mike.
I think it's a good name. I think I need to keep that. I like the moniker of that one. I was a client a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
Just made it up. Like I was working with a client, and they're like, "Is Data Mike joining?" I'm like, "What the heck?" And they just kind of out of the whim, they just kind of like it kind of stuck a little bit. And I was like, "This is kind of cool." I actually like.
Wasn't that a client you and I were both working on?
Yeah, we were both working on it.
That's right.
And they kept asking for Data Mike all the time. Is Data Mike going to be on this? Is Data Mike here? And I'm like, okay, that's not bad. Actually, when I made the jerseys, one of the jerseys I made has Data Mike. That's my jersey from that one. That is the only exception to the names on the jerseys, because all the jerseys have been named after product team members. Like it's like the all-star team of the people that play for stuff. So, yes.
Well, certainly a happy Tuesday, gentlemen. Happy Tuesday. Glad to have you back. How were the travels across the pond?
There's so many things to talk about. There's so much stuff to talk. It's crazy. But Tommy was a speaker there.
Had a great time.
How'd
the
session go, Tommy?
I think the session went really well. I asked Mike to give it to me straight. And
I give him the sandwich.
Yeah, the compliment sandwich. That's literally what I said. I'm like, you never heard of this?
Seth almost spit out his water all over the microphone.
The compliment sandwich.
Yeah. So basically,
the idea is like, I needed the sandwich, Mike. Give me the sandwich. I had very few things I could actually say. Like there was almost nothing like to improve upon. I thought it was really good.
So the compliment sandwich can either go the other one way or the other, but usually it's you give a compliment, something to improve, which is your meat, and then another compliment. Or if it was really bad, you switch it up. But no, it went great. It was
you go really bad.
I don't think you want to switch it up.
Yeah.
I don't think you're gonna do bad, good, bad. I don't think you want to end on a low note, Tom. I think the whole point of it is to end on a high note. That's the point.
But man, it was so great to talk in front of people and just being able to be a speaker again. It was so packed. It was so awesome to meet half these people that I've been following online and see them in person.
Well, and this is one of the largest data. So, Seth, this reminisced a bit of. Have you been to SQL Bits, Seth? Have you been to one yet?
Not Bits.
Okay, not Bits.
One I did was Pass Summit.
Pass Summit. Okay. So this conference had reminiscent feelings of the Data Insight Summits, the first two, because it was
more data. Scale, like how many? Do you know how many attendees?
I think they started with 2,300. And then they scaled up to 2,500. So our first year at Data Insights was like 1,200, 2,500. It was a smaller group. And then in the year after that, it got a lot bigger. And I think they went up to like 1,000 or 3,000. So it felt like that range of like that. It was a sweet spot. 1,000 to 2,500 seemed like a good number. And if you went to the conference or you paid for the conference, you actually got access to all the videos as well online. So you can watch all the videos. I did not get to really watch any of the conference sessions too much. So I was spending so much time hanging out and talking. I was very interested in investing back into the community and the conference and making sure that it went well. I actually sponsored a booth. So I went there. We had the Carlos Solutions booth. We were announcing Tips Plus. Dude, I was selling theme generator like it was going out of style. Like everyone, have you seen the new theme generator? Have you seen the fact that it does on visual editing? Like you can edit the theme and it shows up instantly, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is really good." So
basically, you were presenting the entire conference.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, the nonstop presenting theme generator.
You, Mike Carlo, Data Mike is not going to get locked down to just a session. He's going to be.
I'm going to make my own session, 24/7, perpetual session.
The best thing was Mike he had a ridiculous coffee machine. So everyone was going over to this booth, even though people had
brilliant
giant lights and all the, how vendors go all out.
Okay. I have a story around this one. I'll tell you. So, this is a lesson learned from Michael when I used to do booth days at other conferences. So I used to work for a Fortune 100 company. In that company, we did a whole bunch of booth stuff.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Christian. Yeah, the coffee was good as long as the machine was working. We had to do a little bit more homework on making sure the machine's better this time. But I was the barista. I was literally at my thing, and everyone would come over. And I used to make coffee a long time ago. But I learned when we were at the conference there was it was for motorcycles, and so there was the Ducati. That's the Italian booth. So the Ducati is Italian, so all the Italians were hanging around the Italian booth. Everyone, no matter who it was across the entire conference, wanted a really good espresso. So nonstop, their espresso machine was like running 24/7 throughout the conference. Everyone loved the espresso machine. And I know coffee conference, coffee
conferences,
coffee,
coffee at conferences.
yes, coffee at conferences isn't usually just a drip pot thing. It's like not very good. And I was tagging people as they came down the aisle. I was like, "Hey, you drinking coffee from the convention? Hey, come on, I have an espresso. Come over here." They're like, "Oh yeah, tell me what you do." And then it turned into like a 45-minute demo of theme generator and how amazing it is these days. So
well done, Mike.
I learned from that and said, I'm just going to continue. I think this could be a thing. I would love to be like the one that sponsors the machine that does the espresso at every conference.
So now you've given away your secret.
They saw it at the
you create a new shirt that says the original Coffee Mike or something like that.
Yeah, Coffee Mike.
Coffee Mike.
Espresso Mike.
What persona are you wearing today? It's on the shirt.
It's on my shirt. What personality are we going with today?
So big conference, a lot of people,
a lot of
big names, a
lot of big names.
I was monitoring on Twitter, a lot of big names are, including you two. I've heard a lot about the party. Does it live up to its hype?
I've never been to any conference, no matter what party it was, that was that level. Microsoft has put on some pretty good MVP parties as well. This was above that. I mean, this was incredible.
My gosh.
I've never seen anything like it.
From the food to the drinks to the events.
Okay. I'm going to rat you out, Tommy. I'm ratting Tommy out now.
No. What about you? I'm going to rat you out.
What about me? Okay, there's a couple things to rat. Okay, the party had some great things. All right. One of the things in the party, Tommy comes in. Tommy's hungry. All right. So apparently Tommy eats on a very regimented schedule, and if Tommy doesn't eat, he has to get food. So this is something you must know about Tommy. Tommy eats on a schedule.
This is not surprising.
This is not surprising.
He is about food. That there's a schedule around this.
Exactly right. So Tommy goes out to the conference. He comes back to the room. He's like, I got like an hour. He's like, I'm starving. He orders some kind of food from like an Uber or something like that. So he has an entire meal. The food comes to he eats it. He comes into the conference. I'm like, Tommy, let's go get some food. He's like, I already ate. I already had a meal. I ordered it from Uber, whatever. I was like, okay, great. Let's go grab some beers and we'll hang out. So we grab some beers. We're kind of walking around. Then I go through a line to get food because I need food. And then Tommy looks over there and goes, those little, I don't know what they were. Like little.
Those chicken sandwich things?
Chicken sandwich things? I don't know what they were, but Tommy goes over and that looks kind of interesting. So he had one. Okay. Tommy eats it and he's fine, whatever. Literally 5 minutes later, I can't find Tommy. He's got a tray with 3 of them on there and he's just eating them. And then another time I go somewhere else and he's got another tray. I can't remember. I don't know how many trays of these things you ate. You must have eaten at least 4 or 5 of these dumb things. And I was like, Tommy, you already ate. This is like second meal. And he was like, they're so good. You got to try them. It was hilarious.
That may or may not have happened. Yes.
Costumes were there. Like, so there were some, so the idea is you get into the party and there was lots of good music playing. There was a dance floor. There was people it was all Dungeon and Dragon themed. So they had like, it was a lot more, like this one area where you had these full body costumes and you had like these maces you would have, and you would swing these maces around and try and knock the other person. Like it's like you put a costume on, the head on top of the costume was like Velcroed on, and you had to swing these maces around until you hit the Velcro off the other costume. So you're like, there was people literally just dueling like crazy in there. They had little games you could play. They had in the back they had axe throwing. This is another good story too. We had axe throwing. So Tommy, as soon as Tommy sees the axes, Tommy goes, "Aye, laddie. We're gonna throw some axes." Like he turns into Irish guy or whatever.
Italian to Irish?
Yeah. Do it, Tommy. Do some of the accents.
Scottish. Well, I mean, you just can't bring it out randomly. I'm here in Chicago, not okay. It was gonna be a great day.
Yeah, great day. Throw the axes.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we get up there and Tommy's just all in on the the Scottish accents. Aye, you throw it like really hard, and so we're throwing axes, and Tommy's like, all right, I'm gonna, like, Tommy loves making bets, and I should have made a bet on this one. I didn't know how this is gonna go. Maybe Tommy's a sleeper axe thrower. I don't know. He could have been just incredible.
No,
so Tommy's like, throws his axe, ding, just falls off on the ground. Boom, done. All right, I get up there, I grab my axe, I'm like, thump, right there. I get like, there's the bullseyes, so I get like a 4 immediately. I'm like, oh, great, I lucked out. That's gonna be the one I'm gonna get. We keep throwing axes. Tommy's just going all over the place. I mean, it's just bouncing off of everything. It's not sticking. It's going every which way. Meanwhile, I'm dropping like dead bombs. I'm like, boom, boom, boom. I'm like, this is totally random that this is happening. So it was hilarious. And the guy on the side of the booth kept trying to coach Tommy. Don't step like that. Throw it straight.
Yeah. Keep
Use the bottom of the handle. Stop being like an idiot. Don't throw it like a girl. He was just being like, what the heck? It was like, it was hilarious.
You found a hidden gift.
We found a hidden. I have a hidden gift. I can throw axes apparently.
I can throw axes. Like, and it was bullseyes too, and they were sticking.
It was, yeah. It never got a bullseye, but I mean, it went like a bullseye, 2, 4, and like no, it was like 4, 2, and 1 point or something like that. Yeah. I was nailing 2s and 4s the whole time. I had like 16
PowerBI guy
points.
from the chat is definitely right on. I think he says Tommy's accent sounds like it's from an Austin Powers film.
That's basically.
Yeah, exactly right.
It's a bit copied after that.
Well, but I gotta give PowerBI guy a great hand of applause here, because I think I made Ben freak out a little bit, because during the conference I had scheduled a 1 hour YouTube call, webinar, or just an interview with Ben, and I don't think I laughed so hard. I was having a blast just talking. Well, apparently the next day, the reason why it was part of the reason why it was so fun, the conference attendees somehow knew that I was on this, and they were all like wasted in some room in the evening, and they were like all getting on the chat, and they were saying all these funny things and talking about stuff there on the chat, and they were like, oh my gosh, it was a mess. So they're all piling on the chat. I'm talking with Ben, and Tommy comes in the room. He kind of just like lays down the bed. He's like, I'm so tired, and so Ben says something. I'm like, Tommy's here. Come over here, Tommy. And I grab Tommy and bring him into the stream. I'm like, say hi, Tommy. It was just the best.
Well, no, I was expecting. Yeah. It was too funny. It was too funny.
Sounds like a great time.
It was good.
Great time to be had. Maybe 2024 sequel bits.
I think it needs to happen.
The videos are now on demand. So
already, that was fast.
Yeah.
And they had a really interesting thing in the conference that I've seen this once, but I think maybe they do this more often now. But they had every single session on a live video camera on a wall, and then you could put headphones on, and you could switch the channels of each headphone. So if you couldn't get into the room, you just had to find a pair of headphones. And they did these like really large SQL Bits beanbags, which are fun. So you could just literally hop into a beanbag, sit back, and you could just click to the one you wanted, and then just listen to it. So you could actually listen to the speaker and watch remotely, even though you're in the car. I thought it was great. SQL Bits team, amazing job. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Highly recommended. I want to do it again next year. We need to have one of those. There needs to be an equivalent of that in the US. There's not. There is nothing US side that is that good. So anyways.
Or maybe, us United Statesers just need to head over there for a while. Like we've had these major conferences. It's always the Europeans and all other countries, fun. Right? That have
I like what they do. Yeah, I agreed. So I totally agree.
The one last thing that happened that I knew was going to happen when I left, but it's just so great to meet the international MVPs, by the way.
You guys are awesome.
Yeah.
I wish we lived closer.
Yeah. So I don't even want to say the last name because I know I would absolutely murder it. But I got a ride from Nikki from the Holland, from the Netherlands, on the way back to the States. And
you're going to the airport, so he's basically driving you from the hotel to the airport. Yeah, because he was going like earlier, and you had to get up earlier to go with him to make it on time for the airport. Yeah.
And as soon as I got to the airport, the person at my the front desk was like, "Oh, well, that suitcase is too big, or for Bristol to Ireland." I'm like, "Well, it was totally fine going from Ireland to Bristol."
Oh no.
And I just knew in my head, I was just like, this is not making it to Chicago. So sure enough, luckily all my computers and all this stuff was in a backpack, but lost my baggage. So in that process now.
Really? So you had to like send it a different way?
I don't know where it is right now. So it's probably in our.
Still don't know where it is.
Nope.
They were like, "I told you, it's too heavy.
It's too big.
It's not going."
Oh my goodness!
But
that's crazy.
Honestly, because I didn't lose like the phone and iPad, it would be well worth it. From, like I said, just awesome time with the networking, with talking to people. No, and one last thing actually about the conference. That was a great the videos on screen and the sessions themselves, the content, really good. Like just really solid people, really solid content. I know there's some major announcements that came out, but it was just
okay. We're gonna get into that next because this is what I want to talk about. I've been so yes. So thank you very much, SQL Bits team. Incredible conference. I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to come back. You can sign me up. I'm going to be the next one with the coffee machine next year. Hopefully that'll work out as well. All right. I want to transition. There is something that Microsoft has just announced that will change how everything works. Like this is fundamentally a major game changer. So there was a session held by Rui Romano, who was remote, and they did a little recording. So it's Rui Romano's session. It was also led by Matthias, and I forget the other person who was presenting that was Gabby Munster. So it was Matthias, Gabby Munster, and Gabby is from the Microsoft product team. There is the future version of tabular models. And so this is called, I just can't believe it's called TMDL, TMDL. So we have the TMSL, which is what the current multidimensional model or the tabular model lives in today currently. But TMDL is a text-based way of being able to create a data model, all the tables and the columns, all the things and the objects. And it basically removes JSON from the need to be able to build and create data models. And it is incredible. So it's like YAML in a lot of ways, but it's not the exact same thing. It's been customized for Microsoft's needs, which is absolutely incredible. So if you go to I'm going to try and find a couple of tweets here off of Twitter as well, and I'll throw them in here on the tweet page. You have to go check out these links. Microsoft just announced it. It was absolutely incredible.
I don't think the GitHub has much right now.
The GitHub is fairly blank at this point.
Yeah.
But there are some screenshots that I was able to capture from the presentation that were, second to none. And this is going to fundamentally change how you build things. And for anyone who's in a team trying to dev, test, prod their models, this is what you need to know. And there's one slide here that I caught towards the end, and I'll put that in here as well. That was the TMDL recap. So there's a brand new tabular definition. This is fully supported by Microsoft. It's human readable. It's editable in any text editor. So it's all text editing stuff.
Editable or
editable?
Editable.
I thought I was the one who thought about food.
You wonder why Tommy gets hungry talking to you.
I know, right? Yeah. It has an out-of-the-box folder structure. It is fully Microsoft supported. So it'll be in their products and easy to be built through. And external tools are already supporting it. So it'll be through the Tom library will be automatically supported. So PBI Tools is currently in process of directly implementing this feature, as well as Tabular Editor will also be implementing the TMDL. And you would say it like TIMDEL, TMDL, but that's how they kind of been talking about it. It's TMDL. So Matthias did an immense amount of work on this thing and really, really helped out with the definition and creation of this. So it's Microsoft's new language, basically. It's a TMDL file, I think is how you're going to see it. But wow, it's absolutely phenomenal. So super thrilled about this new announcement.
So did they talk about when they were going to roll it out?
Oh,
is it rolled out?
No, good question. So it fully supported, but no timeline was given. So they were not willing to give us any kind of range of when is acceptable for that. However, I do this is really, really awesome. So we haven't even seen this was so hot off the press. You didn't even see an actual blog post from Microsoft on this yet. So I think they're still trying to get the official announcement kind of out there and done. so they can start. So I think when you start seeing an official announcement, that's when you may start seeing some inclinations as to timelines of things. But my understanding is this is fundamental. Like, so, and the reason I think this is so revolutionary. If you ever had worked on a Markdown document, I think I'm using Markdown because it's just plain text. If you're using a Markdown document and in VS Code, you can track changes with a Git repo. And so it's very easy to read a diff on a Markdown file because you can clearly see what individual rows or columns have been changed or highlighted. And that happens just by default because you're using VS Code. So a lot of this problem that we have today with a lot of the changing the model and seeing what's changed or not changed, it's all in JSON. You have to basically unwind it into tabular editor. Tabular editor has to unwind the whole thing into a folder structure, check stuff in, check it out. But it's so much more complex. It's still all in JSON. It's not in this easy to read format. Anyways, Matthias, very nice job. Excellent job on all the hard work. This is going to change how we work with Power BI. This if you don't pay attention to this one, you're going to miss out. Anyways, sorry, didn't mean to gush about that so much.
No, I mean, this is really, honestly, finally going to as close as we're going to get to a source control and really having source control. I know it's still obviously a command line interface, but the language, that honestly, that barrier with Trump, when you normally would extract in is in JSON and it's unreadable or in a sense from a pure enterprise or developer point of view, really, it's basically, unmanageable from a code point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But now with this language that you can actually really view it, this is going to hopefully ALM Toolkit too would update this as well. But you can really actually set up pretty good workflows in terms of using either DevOps or GitHub. I think we're finally going to see
the whole plan or the whole play here. It seems like is like we've been asking for CI/CD pipelines for Power BI forever because there's that governed level of things that we need and we just don't have it. So this is a very big step into being able to get a much more well-defined, easy to read, easy to compile and decompile language that will let us build models much faster. And Matthias was showing things in the demo. He was like, if you want to add a comment to a table or a column, all you do is hit 3 backslashes and write your comment. Done. It's simple. So the whole idea of the TDML, the TIMDL is make it as easy as possible. I'm still working on the language here, but it's not JSON and it's not YAML. It's like a mix of kind of like two languages there. So again, it's so well written. Someone was asking questions about things. Is the spacing important? So in YAML, the spacing is very important for the formatting. So every tab you make or something like that is very important for where things are indented or not indented. The answer is kind of. Most of it is yes, in the same way as YAML, but there are some things like if you imagine pasting or copying your DAX code has all kinds of weird formatting. Mm-hmm. They've already made accommodations to make sure that it's easy to paste DAX code in, and when you're using DAX or M, you can paste in however you want, and then the spacing is not relevant for that section of code. It's just, oh man, it's just so well done. So it's been super, super cool.
Sounds exciting.
Anyways, love it.
Speaking of one other real quick update, they did open up more analysis services properties in Power BI Premium on your workspace. So there's a new setting that will override your capacity settings. Since we're talking about models and how to integrate with and those, so be aware that blog came out on the 16th. So be sure to go take a look at that as well.
I'll throw that one in the chat window. The analysis services extended properties in Premium.
Yeah. So
and this is a
GA. Yep.
It's a Premium only feature as well.
Yeah. Well, interacting with your analysis services models on the back end is a Premium feature itself.
Yeah, makes sense. I get it. Any other major announcements or things before we actually get into actual talking about things?
They didn't have any release dates with the TIMDL.
No,
I don't think so.
No published release dates. They just said what they always say: soon. Everyone's like, is it very soon, or is it like really, really soon, or is it like kind of soon, or like
TBD
maybe it's soon. It's soon. So everyone was pushing on when they could start playing around with it and when it would be officially supported. So it's going to be incredible. Looking forward to it.
Look forward to talking about it.
Yeah, it's going to be good. There'll probably be a whole, 15 minutes in one episode about it. Excellent. Let's move on to our main topic for today. Finally, we've finally gotten there. So everyone, thank you very much for listening. We appreciate it for the long intro. Sorry, Tommy and I were traveling. It got super fun. We thank you everyone who attended the conference. Super enjoyable to see you there. We can't wait to go to the next one. So on to the next thing. Let's talk about some really, really good topic stuff, dealing with errors. Tommy, tee us up here. What's the topic for today?
Yeah, so we all have dealt with it in various ways, whether it's by our own doing or simply going to new extremes. But we're just really talking about dealing with all the types of errors you can get in Power BI. And over our 8 years of experience, 24 years total combined, what have we done when we are met with one? How do we approach it? What are some of the best ways that we can be efficient in terms of either pivoting or figuring it out? And again, from the error point of view, we got quite a range, wide scope. You have your data source errors or access errors. Some things not connecting or refresh. Power query errors.
Yep.
Obviously, we got a model. Obviously, we got DAX. And then trying to add some visuals together when we're doing certain analysis. And then there's some things in the service, but really from that whole workflow of how the developer deals with the errors.
Yep. Okay. So we're going to cover everything, every error
we're
you've
going
ever
to hit
seen.
all errors in Power BI this morning. So
there you go.
You joined us.
Anytime you have a problem with your report, this episode will solve all the problems because we're going to cover all of them. So I would say let's maybe start with maybe new users, where new users kind of struggle the most, because there's probably a good majority of new users listening to the podcast, or maybe starting to get to listen to the podcast. I would think some of the main challenges I think I find with initial users, they're usually DAX challenges. So they're trying to write a formula. They use a formula that creates a table, but the table is trying to be returned as a measure. So there's some disconnect there. I've also seen a lot of new users try to, in a measure, add 2 columns or do some sort of row level calculation to produce the result, but they don't understand that that's an iterator and you need to use an iterator function, or you just can't add 2 columns. You have to sum them or do some sort of aggregation first, and then you can add the results to get to the answer. So those would be my things for, I think, a new user. The only other one I could think of would be modeling errors, where you're trying to build a relationship and people get a little bit confused around the bidirectional, the single, what is it doing? I tried to make a relationship and it said no. Those kind of things I think are the main errors that we encounter for new users. Really? What do you
think? I'd go earlier than that. I think some of the some issues stem just from connecting to data sources, right? So if I one that I've encountered a lot with new users is trying to connect to a file and they don't understand why it's not working, but it's because it should be a shared location, but somebody mapped a drive and it's their actual local location, right? They're when we share a PBIX file, right? Somebody's trying to connect to your local machine, and that's not going to work.
Yep.
Right. So a lot of the times, if you're working on shared documents and Excel files, you need to copy the web link of the SharePoint location or that shared network drive, and not your local when giving it to people. Another one that I think trips up a lot of folks, especially on the business side, is if you're accessing databases, there are a whole set of roles and user permissions that can be granted very specifically to users as far as which objects you can actually interact with. So just because you may have had something created for you and it uses it works in reporting, if there was a new view or a new store procedure created for you, you may not have permissions for that, right? So you need to reach out to the owner of the database to ensure that you have the appropriate access.
That makes total sense.
Those I see a lot. And then one of the ones I was kind of thinking through, what are what are a lot of the errors I used to encounter a lot? And a lot of them
when you used to build reports
all across the reports, was Power Query, right?
Yeah.
Not understanding the fundamentals of the advanced, when you're in advanced features, M code, right?
Yep.
If you removed a step or rearranged steps or something, you'd get a warning and be like, hey, do you really want to do that? Yeah, man, click delete. And then your steps would go away and everything would break after a certain point and you wouldn't know how to fix it. Right. And
really
more often than not, the easiest thing to do is just to go into advanced features and you likely have one line that is referencing the old step name and you can't do that. You have to go update the step name in there. And that's all you have to fix. Right. So there's, I think, a lot of those unforced errors right in the beginning where if you're not familiar enough with the languages underneath the, some of the clicking buttons, it causes a lot of frustration because, and a lot of those frustrating errors can be easily solved if you just extend that skill set a little bit and become at least familiar with the M that's in the advanced features area. And those are, like, to me, some of the ones I just recall, or a lot of users would come to me with, as opposed to obvious challenges in DAX and creating some of the formulas and things for visualization.
I mean, isn't that the perfect beginner technical debt is with Power Query? Because generally speaking, most of the errors that a beginner is going to get is not necessarily in their first time. Maybe, like the atom column's pretty straightforward. Maybe there's a few issues with some grouping, but where those large errors come is when those dependencies and they start taking that next step from, there's something to rename. There's like you said, there's a lot of different steps. So like, all of a sudden you renamed a column or removed it because you really didn't need it. And all of your other steps you have moved and reordered that no longer work. So now how do you actually modify that or your merges? And that's really from my experience. And I mean, even this day, I'll give a good example. I'm working on a new version of the Scanner API template report, because Microsoft announced that they have more metadata. So it's like, okay, we've got to go find that. And going through the different, you have to do more extending columns. You have to do more expanding. Well, because of that, there's the relationships broke. And it's the same thing where rather than me going in and I am much more intelligent now than I was in the past, where when I know that it's going to be more than just to add a column, I'm going to copy and paste and I'm going to create that in a separate space to do that development. Because that those Power Query is sometimes will save it. So that's a huge thing for me is I will do my step by step in a different space or in a different environment.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a good technique. I think this is a good opportunity. Someone from the conference recommended add a section to your podcast around practical knowledge. Pull on your history of what you've done.
There you go.
Here we go. So new segment. Let's talk about practical knowledge, right? How do you solve some of these problems? So let's talk into the practical time. I don't know. We got to work on the name. I think my naming of this section is not very appropriate. It's time for practical knowledge. Dun, 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 dun. But that being said, I mean, I think to your point, Seth, earlier, how do you debug Power Query? What's the solution there? How do you get through Power Query as a problem? And I think the Power Query problem here, how I've communicated this to new students is, if you have a problem in your Power Query, you delete some steps or breaks things, go back to the source. So, when we're debugging Power Query specifically, go to the very first step, which is typically source, and then walk your way through one step at a time and see at which step does it break. Because usually 9 times out of 10, Power Query breaks because you renamed a column. Something downstream doesn't find it anymore, and it says, "Whoops, I can't do that." So that seems like that's many of my main problems there.
That's a great point, right? Like, just because the final step shows that you have the error, as you walk up the steps or walk down the steps, there's going to be a break point, right? Like, one of them is going to work, it'll load, and then it breaks. Another easy one that causes that issue is where, as you're ingesting a file, you might remove a column, or You're creating a custom column that references
the
a column.
view changed underneath the hood.
And same principles. Becoming familiar with what that M code looks like. You can just toggle open that advanced editor, look for that column name, and likely just remove it from a string, right? Because it's no longer part of the data set. So I think what our accrued knowledge has brought to the forefront here is don't get scared or walk away from errors, right? It definitely takes a mindset and figuring out like, okay, I'm encountering this thing. There's a reason for it. Let's go troubleshoot, right? Using troubleshooting steps to like, where is it breaking? What is it yelling at me about? Let's go see if I can find that specific thing that it's yelling at me about. Oh, okay, like it makes sense. Here it is in this thing. But a lot of that comes contextually. And that's why I say like Gilbert Reeves' book on Power Query was immensely helpful for me, right? To like just understand M, because it was a brand new language, and I can't even say I know it now because I'm functionally not writing in, but at least I can pop that open and understand like everything that's going on in those queries makes sense to me, and I know how to fix them. One other area of I think probably the most errors I still continue to see are service side, right? So one of the things that trip up new users, right? When you're deploying a brand new report, you have to configure your user settings typically in the data set, especially if you're using cloud sources. So the deployment, before you can configure a scheduled refresh, you're setting your credentials, as well as if you deploy something that has a gateway that you have access to, right? You need to make sure that you have access to something. So maybe that's an administrator, or you need to create a connection to a database. But the setup of the data set has to be part of your deployment. So that immediately causes errors. I don't understand why it's not refreshing, etc. And then you see, I think, where some of the more challenging errors of Power BI come in when it relates to something that is working that started failing. On a refresh schedule of a data set that's already in the Power BI service. So I think those are the big areas, right? Like when we're connecting and doing some of the ETL in Power Query, in model, DAX functions, etc. And then after deployment, configuration and potential breakdowns in refreshing.
I'd agree with that. Any other areas, Tommy, that you would point out here? Any kind of pieces around any other best practices you've been using to debug things? I would say, well, go ahead. You so first. I have one for DAX. So when you're done, I got another one for DAX.
No, I think you said this once to me, and even though it's so.
I only said it once.
You did. You said
so unlike me.
Typically, I repeat myself a lot.
The first time you said it, it was so straightforward, but it did change, like in a sense, really going to the forefront. But anything with DAX, anything with your model, it's only as good as your model is and as clean as your model is. And anytime I'm going through the importance of creating that structured model, whether I have to create a bunch of columns in Power Query for dimensional keys, but I make sure always the focus. I know I'm going to run a lot less errors if I actually have a clean structured data model, because the other part too is not necessarily just the errors. It's also the complications when you have more columns than you need and what you're trying to reference. But the big thing is I'm staying away from many to many. I'm staying away. I'm trying to name the keys the same, because that's where I run issues even before I'm touching DAX.
Yeah. No, I would agree. If you're the rule of thumb here, and I've heard this from the SQL BI guys, if your DAX becomes incredibly complex, that means likely your table design is not right. It's not good. You need to fix that first. Another technique I'd like to use, particularly around debugging DAX, this is another practical corner. Right, here's another practical tip. When you're writing DAX, if you need to debug the DAX, it's not giving you the right result, or it's erroring out, or you don't know what it's returning, highly recommend learn how to use variables and returning statements. because then you can walk through like one statement at a time. You can write your first statement. Okay, I'm going to use this formula. I'm going to return the first result, the first variable, and then make multiple variables. And you can test what the output is as you go along. And then you can see exactly what it's doing, because there is no technically, in desktop, there is no debugger. There is a DAX debugger inside Tabular Editor, which gives you a lot more information about what's going on inside DAX. But realistically, the desktop doesn't really have an easy way for you to understand what part of your DAX statement failed. I've seen this to be very relevant, especially when the filter context on visuals are changing in a weird way, and you're trying to absorb that filter context and use it back into your measure. That's when things get really challenging. And that's usually when I just call Greg Baldini. I just say, hey, Greg, I got a problem. And he's like, yeah, sure, you're an idiot. Here's the 3 lines that you need to cover. Oh, you need to use this new formula that's out there. Boom, done.
I literally asked him on Monday. It was not even for work. It was something I've been doing for years now, every year, and I've never been able to get the measure right. I'm like, hey, Greg, I've been trying to get this right for 5 years. And it was
like you just need to take out that and just put a sum. It's just a sum,
yeah,
Tommy.
I thought we were gonna have a meeting on it, and literally I just sent him a scenario. Greg is really Chat GPT.
Oh, he's a genius.
Greg's currently in our chat too. I love his comment. I teach advanced DAX occasionally. The first lesson is not to use what I teach most of the time.
But Greg, thank you very much. I mean, your contributions back to the community, the things that I've learned from you has been absolutely incredible. You've definitely helped me round out my mental model of how DAX works a bit more. So if you don't know Greg, you should get familiar with him. He's in the chat, Greggy B. Make sure you follow his stuff, hang out with him. You will learn something from him, and he's a good guy.
Indeed.
What else do you want to talk about? Other things here. How do you use Power BI documentation and or the community to help you solve problems? Because I find myself Googling a lot of things, but I wind up on the community site a lot.
I used to be on the community almost every day. Before PowerBI.tips and this podcast, and where I was doing a lot of time there. But it should be the first place that you go for problems. Community.powerbi.com. So since Power BI came out, there's been a community, and that entire repository of questions and answers and knowledge is in one place. That's in a very useful searchable context. Mm-hmm. So 100%, if you want to your problem is probably already solved on the community, and even some of the more obscure errors that you find also pop up there, which is really interesting and unique, because where else are you going to find, you get the obscure Microsoft error, especially with some of these challenging gateway things. And hey, 9 times out of 10, there's typically somebody who's experienced the same thing.
Yeah, exactly right.
So I mean, interestingly enough, I would say the search functionality within the community is almost better than what you would just try to search in Google sometimes, because it usually leads you there. But I have found occurrences where I do find a slight one-off that shows up when I'm doing a search in the community versus just trying to straight internet browse it.
And I remember going to the website the other day and thinking, oh my gosh, there's a lot of posts. I'm trying to look at the number here. I think there's 1 million posts on just desktop alone, just in desktop. That's huge. And that's probably by far the largest one. I think every other topic is much smaller of that. Not nearly as much engagement on the other topics, but again, you spend most of your time in Power BI in desktop anyways, so that would make sense.
I mean, the biggest thing is the samples, right? And I don't know if you guys saw, going back to the GPT thing, but Marco Russo, he did a full hour video of him using Chat GPT, which is for DAX. And just if Marco, it's very entertaining, because
I didn't watch that one. I actually should go back and watch it. Is it on? This is one on. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, and it's really just Marco going, "Oh, okay, I see what you did there." and you honestly, I didn't know if he was going to completely
tear it apart.
But honestly, he was like, "I wouldn't do that," but I see. Okay, but I think honestly, it's using the tools. We've talked about one of the things too is I always, from especially from the community side, look for a sample file that's somewhat similar to what I'm trying to achieve. Especially if there's an error, the number's not right. This is literally what happened. Like I said on Sunday, where Greg came to the rescue in 2 minutes.
Mhm.
But things would disappear when they necessarily shouldn't. And it's like, I need to find a similar data model. And it's honestly, you get really good at asking questions online, or like
Yes.
we've been primed for prompting.
Yes. And I think there's another that reminds me too. So in the error, so this is another practical tip. Here, no, we need a little soundbite for this because we're gonna probably get into this a bit more. But here's another practical tip around this one. Alberto Ferrari wrote an article around how to ask a question. If you want better answers, ask better questions. I think that's what the gist of it is. Does that sound right, Tommy? Did you read that one?
If you want better, yes. I don't remember. Was this a blog or?
I think it was a blog. So I'm gonna see if I can get the blog up here. But the idea is, if you need a better answer, be very specific about your question. So when there's problems and you have errors, think very closely around what will be happening. Like, how do you phrase that as much as you can? So more information technically is better, but very relevant to the question. Hey, I tried this. The data looks like this. Like saying something like the DAX won't work. It is
specific error.
Yeah, and the error is doing this. This measure will work in this kind of condition, but will not work in that kind of condition. So it adds more context and color to that question. So if you ask a much more detailed and focused question, providing better details and insights, it helps the person helping you answer the question. They can answer it much faster.
It's a really good point. And I want to lean into it a little bit, right? What you're talking about is providing the information and the reproducible steps, right? Like if you think about this in terms of like QA, right? You want somebody to find the same error that you are encountering. What a lot of people, especially general users, don't understand is they are so much more likely to get help from somebody on a forum anywhere when you provide all of the context or the file or like everything somebody else who has the knowledge needs to understand your problem, right? Because what you're asking people to do actually is solve a problem for you. And what I see a lot on the community and did when I was heavily interacting and still do is people speak in generals. I have this problem. Here's what it is. And what you're doing is you're forcing the onus of solving that problem and understanding the context and everything about it on the people that want to help you. But the problem is they'll look at that and go, it's just going to take me so long to try to figure out where you're at and what your problem is that it's not worth my time.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Or you find a special unicorn who's like, hey, this looks like a person I want to help for some random reason, versus you taking the onus on yourself because you have the problem to produce everything somebody would need, right? To come in, look at things contextually and solve it immediately for you, and then you get your answer, but you did all the work, as opposed to assuming because you have a problem and you ask a question, somebody's going to take all of that time that they have to solve that one thing for you. So like,
exactly,
big recommendation, do the work yourself. Like tee it up so somebody can help you quickly, as opposed to just assuming you're jumping into a community and saying like, hey, I have this problem and I expect you to solve it, even though it's going to take 40 minutes of your time. Right.
That's actually a perfect thing. I think too often we say, well, there's an error, but the huge, what are we trying to solve? And it always goes back to even less focusing on the problem, especially when we're dealing with others or when we're asking questions, is what's the end result? What is that number or output that I'm trying to get to? Honestly, what I've seen from searches and having 100 tabs open, the search results don't really help when I'm saying what the error is. It's much more when I'm trying to say what I want a result to be.
Are you when you're searching for errors, are you giving a context or are you just putting an error in?
I don't know, honestly, a lot of times, like if the error is not necessarily like tables don't exist or the values, I know that the DAX is not right. I know that the functions that it's just not going to work that way. So I usually start with almost like a revamp where my Google searches and what I look on the community is the result I'm trying to get. Like, let's say I was trying to get hours worked in during working hours, including weekdays, and I had an error because one of the numbers was completely off. I honestly start with looking at other people's examples of doing that same result or trying to do that same method rather than trying to focus on my particular error. Because generally speaking, and again, Greg has shown me this more than once, there are more than one way to do a lot of DAX functions. Again,
yes. That's the challenge of it.
Yeah.
You could calculate it 2 or 3 different ways, and then it now boils down to it potentially is a bit of a performance thing as well, right? So that's another like area where you're like, okay, I could solve it A, B, or C, but which one's faster? And then again, it takes more time. So just because you get the right answer doesn't mean it's the most efficient way to get the answer.
It's a good recommendation for like DAX problems.
Yeah.
The one thing, the reason I asked about context is what I've found is if in search engines, if you lead with the tool like Power BI and then you paste in a subsection of your error and don't include like your specific source database or your location, like just remove that part and have quotes. Giving context of the tool and then some of the actual error message or the error message usually produces better results for me.
I like that.
As opposed to just generally entering in the error, because with Power BI, there's a lot of moving pieces, right? So like this error could be due to, like a SQL database connection, and you're going to get thousands of hits because somebody who's interacting with SQL in an API or some other access location could be muddying your results, as opposed to just limiting down your search a little bit when you're interacting with search engines.
Yeah, makes total sense.
The other thing that I think was made in the thing is if I'm gonna, I know we talked a lot about your guys' experiences, which is great. But one of the biggest things I would recommend for breaking down or for problems within Power BI or errors, and a roundabout comment was made in our chat too, is when you get an error, and it's pointing you to a location, don't just confirm your bias. Like it's very easy when Power BI is like, oh, you have a problem with this column in the way you created it or something, and it points you at the direction, and internally you're just like, nope, there's no problem there. I know there's no problem. Don't do that. Break it down to the basics. And somebody put this in the chat before earlier, I think, like the basics are what you need to go back to. You throw out everything that you built from your mind, and you're saying this problem and this error is like being told it's right here. Why could that be? Like, let's look around contextually within Power Query. Is there something else right before that or after that? Why would it be yelling at me about this specific thing? And it could be like, some case changed, some name slightly changed, somebody did something to a source file that you didn't know. But if you go to the basics, you'll go back to the source, confirm, walk through the steps, and more often than not, you'll come up with the answer.
So that's a really good point, because sometimes the problems you're having are caused by you because you're doing something in Power Query. Sometimes it's just there's a term for this, data drift or something, data quality drift, something kind of drift, I think is there. But there's this concept of the data itself will naturally drift to disorder, right? It doesn't continually get cleaner. It always kind of goes to a state of disarray.
Depending on your source, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's Excel sheets. Like every time, I hate having Excel as an input source, because that's another one of those things where I'm like, if I'm using Excel as an input source, users can do whatever they want in Excel. Columns disappear. Someone says, hey, I'm going to rename this because it makes more sense now. I add a column in the middle of something, it breaks everything. So Excel as a data source is very challenging to work with, and I really do not like it. I'd rather a step above that, a little bit better, which is like SharePoint lists. At least give me like, this is there. It can like start schema drift. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate. That's what I'm looking for. Schema drift or data drift, because there's the schema. Could change. That's columns and things changing, but the data itself can also happen as well. So the data itself can drift additionally.
So one of the things, and I hate, I shouldn't do this because it's at the end to bring up a new thing.
All right, let's do it.
I like Christian's point though. What we've been talking about are the hard errors that we get within Power BI, but one of the challenges that all BI professionals know, and welcome business users as well, is data. Right?
Yeah.
There are like blanks start showing up in the things.
Yes.
So we're not really getting an error, but you have a data issue problem.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
But at the same time, like those are somewhat easier to follow path back to like why that could be occurring if you know what you're looking for. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, if what is the use case? Essentially, you have some dimension values that aren't in your fact table or something, or the vice versa, and
or vice versa,
blanks start showing up.
Yes. Typically, it's more worse when you have things in the fact that are not in the dimension, because then you get
refreshing out of a schedule. Is something
that's a big challenge.
You go back and look at why and where that potentially is happening. And I would say sometimes data problems are like harder to figure out than some of the harder.
Yeah. Well, we obviously talked about the DAX, but there's nothing worse than you've created the model. You think everything's good, but there may not be an issue on your part because something might have changed on the back end, either with the data or you had a Band-Aid solution the whole time. And I think that's a huge part too, is that auditing side of it as well. Like that is, and honestly, that's a different approach. Like I said, I think when we're dealing with errors in the development, again, it's always focusing on what you want that output or that solution to be. When we get those errors because, okay, maybe a data type changed, or there's a new scope and, our model's not going to fit in what the new requirements are. Or like you said, some random refresh error because you have so much technical debt, those are those, and I don't want to say uncommon errors, but those are the unsung frustrations that we deal with, because you may not get the pop-up, but that honestly causes more grief, I think, for consumers, because it's inconsistent refreshes. Data loads incredibly slowly compared to when you're doing development. No one's seen it yet.
Agreed. The term I was looking for, I started Googling while you guys were talking. Covariate shift, I think, is what I was talking about. When the data physically changes under the hood. And one last practical tip I'll give here again, this is another one of these practical items. Another practical tip is, if you're having problems with your data, don't try to solve it all the time in your actual data set. Big data sets, and when you have a lot of problems, sometimes the size of the data set can potentially obscure the problem or the challenge. So a lot of times what I do is I build a representative model, a smaller model that's simpler, that's easier to test to know if I'm doing it right or wrong, and build a mini other Excel file that has, simple tables, simple relationships, and then try to replicate the same error so I can get down to what you said earlier, Seth, the root cause. Why is this really occurring? Oh, excellent. Good talk today. Well, thank you all very much for joining in. We really appreciate it. The chat has been super vibrant here. So thank you, chat, for jumping in and just being super engaging. That was super fun. For everyone else on the podcast, thank you very much for listening. We appreciate your time and your ears, or your eyes if you're watching online. Thank you very much. We appreciate it if you would just give us some recommendations. If you found this was useful, gave you some practical tips, and you have a coworker or someone else you think that would find value, do us a favor. Write what you found valuable and then share the article. That would be super helpful to us. With that, where else can you find the podcast?
Anywhere it's available: Apple, Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to see all the previous episodes that we've done. We want to hear from you. Make sure to submit to the mailbag. Go to PowerBI.tips /the podcast and join the conversation live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central.
Oh, you know what? We missed a segment. Dan caught me.
Guys.
Okay,
hey, we talked over. Are we going to go? You're going to.
I'll just do a bonus. I'll do a quick bonus. Quick bonus. This is Greg Baldini. I need you to give me another little soundbite here for bonus moment or something. Put some in there. This is your bonus item here. How do you deal with errors in Power BI? Dealing with errors in Power BI involves identifying the cause of the error. Okay, so right there, Seth, you're right on it. Understanding the error message. It will display an error message. It'll typically provide some details. Yeah, what it should say here is it'll typically provide obscure details, not real details. So, and then check your data. Many errors in Power BI are caused by issues with the data itself. Spot on. All right, you're 2 for 2, ChatGPT. Let's go for the third one. Check your formulas. If the error is related to DAX or formulas, he doesn't know DAX. I mean, obviously, it's not an Italian. It's not Italian ChatGPT. It doesn't know DAX. Check the formulas. If the error is related to a formula, check to see if there are any syntax errors or logical errors in your formulas. Okay. Oh, look at this one. Check the relationships. There are multiple tables in your report. Check the relationships. I said that one earlier. We caught it. And then use Power BI troubleshooting tools. Interesting. Use Power BI troubleshooting tools that can help you identify any errors. I guess that would be the performance analyzer, or there's another one. There's another tool for Power Query. The same thing. I don't think I use those tools very much. Look at this. Number 6. Seek help from the Power BI community. Seth, you nailed it.
Boom.
It's there.
Be number 1.
Okay. Highly well. Very good, ChatGPT. You made it. I think this is a good one. I would score this one pretty high. This is at 8 or 9. It pretty much hit all the main points. And I know it's good because when it says what we say. Excellent. That was your bonus segment. Thank you, Dan, for keeping me honest. Everyone have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time.